Good afternoon. On behalf of Interpol, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this conference. As the world's largest international police organization with 190 member countries, Interpol's role is to enable police around the world to work together to make the world a safer place. Cooperation is indeed essential to fight organized crimes and trafficking. And if there is one area in which working together makes perfect sense, it's certainly the fight against the illicit trafficking of cultural goods, a phenomenon so complex and difficult to combat, particularly in times of conflict, as it is the case in Syria and Iraq. The destruction of cultural heritage in this region has reached alarming levels. That is why it appears clearly that working together is today even more essential than ever. You can see on this map that 93% of Syrian cultural sites are inside areas of conflict. Only then can the recently adopted UN Security Council resolution aiming to prevent the illicit trade in Iraqi and Syrian cultural property be implemented. UNESCO and Interpol, which are explicitly called to assist the member states in taking appropriate steps to prevent this trade, have immediately highlighted the necessity of strong cooperation. Interpol Secretary General Jürgen Stock underlining the need for a coordinated global response. As well, in follow-up to this resolution, the UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova met in the beginning of March with the Worldwide Director of Compliance for Sotheby's to inform him about her initiative to launch a global coalition of partners involving key stakeholders such as the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, Interpol, the UN Sanctions Committee, and stakeholders from the cultural preservation and art market community. In this occasion, she stressed that the art market and the major auction houses were a key ally to effectively counter illicit trafficking. Why focus on the art market players? Because, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to protect cultural property in situ, above all in the areas under control by the Islamic State or other terrorist groups. At the same time, we only have 5 to 10% chance to intercept the objects once they have been stolen or looted. So we have to act by seeking to narrow markets for the illicit trade, hoping that by curbing the demand, the supply would eventually decrease and the business would become less attractive to traffickers and thieves. The collaboration with auction houses, collectors, museums, internet platforms, and various other art market players is even more needed, as there are huge challenges to face in fighting against illicit trafficking in cultural goods in the field, in particular for law enforcement. Maybe one of the most important issues is the difficulty to work in this area due to the very nature of the trafficking. Cultural objects are not inherently illicit, which means the burden on law enforcement is to prove their fraudulent origins. However, the traceability of an object can be very complicated to determine, starting with the lack and often total absence of proper inventories, as it is the case for archaeological objects. The absence of police register containing information on professional transactions and artifact descriptions is also a major issue. This tool is not required by the majority of states, which doesn't allow for the traceability of the objects. The police register must be not only a register of transactions involving cultural goods in the accounting and administrative sense of the term, as it is the case for United Kingdom or Belgium. It must also be a register that serves to trace the goods bought and held by art market professionals. And its contents must be determined in light of this objective, listing different information on the seller and the object. But as I said, only a few states have created an obligation for art market professionals to keep a register of this kind. For instance, in Europe, Greece, Italy, France, However, these registers are considered by the police and the investigators to be a crucial tool for preventing the illicit circulation of cultural goods. Failure to fulfill the obligation to keep an accurate register would be, moreover, evidence of bad faith. We saw that one of the main tasks of the police consists in proving the fraudulent origins of an object. Determining bad faith on the part of a dealer, for instance, is one of the means to achieving it. So the task of the police also consists in verifying that the buyer of artwork exercises due diligence, with several criteria that should be taken into account at the time of purchase, as due diligence is an element that circumvents good faith. Among the numerous checks to be carried out on the object, the consultation of a database of stolen objects, in particular Interpol's one. And regarding Syria, we are processing information on 1,305 objects from the Deir Atiyah Museum, as well as all known items stolen from other sites. In the framework of this collaboration with the art market players, we need to promote and reward good market behavior. Most of museums or art dealers have, for a long time, codes of ethics or due diligence guidelines. But awareness of the importance of due diligence still needs to be recalled to help potential buyers to increase their level of vigilance. In this perspective, UNESCO signed agreements with major auction houses and big world museums, under which they agreed to refrain from buying any Syrian antiquities that are not supported by official certificates and proof of provenance. One more challenge for the police, and not the least, is obviously the internet, with in particular the difficulty to effectively monitor all of these objects offered for sale. Without a cooperation with online brokerage sites, it is nearly impossible to counter the illicit sale of cultural objects through the internet. This is why Interpol, UNESCO, and ICOM have co-signed a letter in 2007 setting out a checklist of basic actions where the states are encouraged to cooperate closely with internet sales platforms. Some states, such as Switzerland, or state-level institutions, such as the MLA in the UK, have concluded interesting partnerships agreements with brokerage firms, especially with eBay. Regarding the situation in Iraq and Syria, the eBay General Counsel says his team stays in close contact with a number of outside experts and law enforcement agencies to stop trafficking on the online auction site by identifying any misuse of eBay and then take appropriate action. To conclude, it is obvious that the key to fighting the trade in illicit antiquities lies in cooperation and must involve representatives of the art market. But given the dramatic context in the Middle East, one must wonder if the legal instruments currently in use to combat the illicit trafficking of cultural goods are well suited to the reality on the ground. And there is some debate about whether we should better regulate the market. Some countries think so, as for instance Germany, which plans to tighten regulation of art and antiquities trade, proposing a new law allowing only cultural goods with an official export license from their countries of origin to enter its borders. As well in the US, where 4 congressmen recently reintroduced a bill into the House of Representatives that attempts to restrict imports of cultural property illegally trafficked from Syria. But such initiatives might be difficult to implement, given the opposition of the art market community, as in the US, where a political push for the protection of Syrian antiquities might be difficult to come by. Thus, the German Minister of Culture also expects the influential antique dealers lobby will try to put pressure on Berlin to abandon its project. One can effectively estimate that new laws are not needed and that museums, collectors, and the market can police themselves. In UK, for instance, British politicians are also not lobbying for new legislation, preferring asking for effective enforcement of existing laws and for more resources for the Metropolitan Police Art and Antiques Squad. But as I have said before, it's not only a question of resources, but rather a complexity of investigations in the field. This is why the adoption of legally binding global measures to counter the illicit traffic appears essential to help narrow down trafficking channels and markets. And art markets are not necessarily opposed to more regulations. Thus, last month, at the International Symposium on the Illicit Traffic in Cultural Property organized by Interpol, the president of the French National Union of Antiques Dealers insisted on the high interest of the police register as a crucial tool for fighting the illicit trafficking, and that it should be made mandatory and generalized. In the same way, in light of the dramatic situation we are facing in the Middle East, we should strongly support the strengthening of legal frameworks. Thank you for your attention.